I'll copy you. I'm too little. Hello and welcome to Your Favorite Book, the podcast. I'm Malorie.
And I'm Tanner.
And we like books.
Yes. We're also siblings. We mention that at every podcast.
That's kind of the whole point.
Yeah. That was the point of this podcast, to tell people that we're related.
Yeah. It's not about books. You read into that wrong. This week we are talking about our top 5 favorite books. And I'm really excited to see what your top 5 is.
Yeah. Likewise.
Yeah.
This episode is a little bit different from our usual. We usually talk about just one book that, the other person has read and they said that it's their favorite. And really why we started this podcast was because we wanted an excuse to read each other's books, because we'd always tell each other, hey, I read this, I think you'd really like it. And then the other person would never read it.
Yep.
Which is fair. This podcast is a great way for us to do that. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember what episode it was specifically. We talked about, what do we even consider a favorite book?
Yeah.
Because are we going to run out of books to talk about on the podcast?
Yeah, it's interesting to look at what I deem as a favorite or what you deem as a favorite.
Yeah.
Especially being that from the sense of the word, you can really only have one favorite book.
Yeah.
But I think it's more complicated than that.
I think so too. I think this is really defining our terms.
Yes.
I think for us, a favorite book is more broad than an all-time favorite or a top 5.
Yeah.
And so that's what this podcast is for. Mm-hmm. And I do think it would be fun if we reach a certain point where it's okay, you've read all of my favorite books, my top 5 favorite books, and I've read your top 5 favorite books.
Yeah.
And then to kind of branch out from there.
Yeah. I really like this podcast because it gives me a glimpse into what you like in books and what media you like to partake.
Yeah.
And it goes both directions, and it's cool to see here's the similarities, here's where we're really, really different.
Yeah.
And you can find stuff that you didn't think you'd enjoy, and stuff that you're oh yeah, there's a reason why I don't read that.
Yeah. And you do learn a lot if you're a real fan of storytelling, and if you want to write yourself, I think it's really important to expand your palette and to read things that you never considered before, and to really ask yourself why you do or don't like those things.
Yeah, I think it's nice to have a critical eye for that versus if someone's oh my gosh, this is my favorite thing. And you're why?
Yeah.
You're I just liked it a lot.
It's not a very compelling reason.
No.
That's been my favorite part of the podcast, personally. That's been the biggest takeaway, I guess.
Yeah.
As far as what we consider a top 5 favorite, before we did this episode, we didn't establish a set in stone criteria. I'll tell you what my criteria was personally. It might differ from yours, but for me, the books in my top 5, the first thing I considered was how much of an impact did it have on me emotionally, and how much did it actually change my life.
Yeah. That
was the biggest one. And the first 2 books on my list were extremely easy to fill in for that reason. Because I had never read anything in my life that has changed me the way that they have. So they really are, I think, immutable at that point.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I ranked highly was how many times I've read these books. I come back to these stories again and again. They aren't particularly impactful emotionally, but they're stories that I just love, and I will never grow tired of.
Yeah. For me, my top 5 is pretty similar to your parameters. How often I've reread this, I used to hate rereading books. I was morally opposed to it for some reason. I was why would I waste my time going through a second time? Then I read the Goose Girl series, and I was oh, this is something I'll reread every year, every other year.
Yeah.
And the same with Percy Jackson. I reread Percy Jackson probably once a year.
Spoilers.
But that rereadability is definitely a big draw to me. If there's something that I'm even though I find comfort in this story, it's still fun to go through it again, learn new things, see new connections, and just experience it again.
Yeah.
And I'm not tired or bored of it, even though it is familiar.
Yeah. You're dying of thirst.
I'm dying of spit down my throat.
That's okay. We have the power and magic of editing.
Yes. The other thing I love about books is the emotional impact, how much it still affects me, even if it's been a long time since I've read it, or if I'm like watching a piece of media and I'm like, oh, that's similar to this other aspect of this that I like. Like, I like that if it's something that I'm like comparing it to other things to see if it's good, if that makes sense. And funny enough, fan art is one of mine.
Oh, really?
I have created fan art for almost all of my top 5. Just because it's like another way for me to express my interest and enjoyment in a series.
I've done that before too, but only for one of these books.
You should expand your fan art vocabulary.
I should.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I just love fan art more than
I like doing
error.
it. Yeah. It's really fun for me to do like character designs of people from books.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Where it's like you have a totally different interpretation of this character from someone else just based on like description.
Yeah.
So I think that's the cool part about it.
Yeah. I love fan art.
Yeah.
Thank you to all the fan artists out there.
Yes, that make these books so much cooler.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And without further ado, we should get into our top 5.
Okay.
And starting with number 5.
Yes.
I'll go first.
You go first? Okay.
Okay. My 5th favorite book is Ender's Game. This is...
Who's it by?
Orson Scott Card.
Okay.
He's a prolific sci-fi fantasy author. This is my original copy. I don't know if it's an original copy, but this is the copy that I read when I was 11.
Yeah.
And it's kind of torn up and beat up, but that's part of the readability aspect.
My original Percy Jackson book 1 that I read, one time my mom borrowed it to a neighbor.
Your mom?
Our mom borrowed it to a neighbor, and they never gave it back because it was already falling apart, so they bought us a new copy, which was really nice, but I was like, I would rather have the 2 broken pieces.
And they burned the other one.
Yep. Anyway.
That's adorable. I think that is a really cool aspect about physical copies, just as a side note.
Yeah.
Is it's cool to have one for so long and to like look at all these pages.
This really is falling apart.
Yeah. I really try not to read this as much because I don't want it to fall apart anymore. I've listened to the audiobook and I have another copy, but it's fun to see
it's good to have
the wear and tear.
Yeah.
But like I said earlier, ooh, that is an ugly cover. Like I said earlier, I read this book when I was 11. This was after I had finished books like Harry Potter and The Hobbit and some other stuff. I can't really remember. Smaller stuff. Oh, like there was a How to Train Your Dragon book. I read that when I was really little. And Ender's Game was one of the first books where it felt like, ooh, I'm an adult now. Which is funny because it's about a 7 or 6-year-old kid. The basic premise is it's about a child soldier who is a genius born in the future, and he's taken to battle school, which is like a satellite in space, and all these kids train to become generals and commanders in the bugger alien army. It's got a pretty good twist at the end. It's not a very, I don't know if it's very cliche, but it really does feel like the first story about kid who's really good at video games. In battle school, it's not like he plays a ton of video games, but he's a strategist and a coach.
Yeah.
He's obviously, like I said, a genius. So some people might say it's Mary Sue, but I think that's kind of a loaded term. Yeah. He's extremely competent in that area. And I absolutely love this book because it is very character driven.
Yeah.
Children are typically very difficult to write, and it helps that Ender's a genius, so he kind of thinks like an adult.
Yeah.
So that kind of curbs that difficulties. It's kind of brutal. The trauma that Ender goes through as such a little boy is so unfair, but so captivating. The progress he makes from being a child to growing up as an adult, it happens very quickly in the book, actually, when he realizes that he's totally alone. The reason why he's called Ender is because he's born as the 3rd child in a world where the government, I think it's a world hegemony, so it's not like just the United States government, They don't allow people to have more than 2 children because there are concerns with overpopulation, I'm assuming. And Ender was the last child of these 2 parents that was born. And I think his brother nicknamed him that. His real name is Andrew Wiggin.
Ender is much more compelling and
it's
interesting.
It's a much more interesting name. But it's a big cast. It's got a big cast of characters, which is also an aspect of storytelling that I've realized I love. And you just care about... I love dogs.
Our dogs are barking.
And I just love a big cast of characters. That's something that I realized about stories. And you care about all of them.
Yeah.
But at the heart of it all, Ender is conflicted between being a monster who's capable of killing other people, like his older brother Andrew. And his older brother Andrew is a bully and has terrorized him his whole life. And being not wanting to be that. Being more sensitive and caring like his sister Valentine. So Ender, he realizes that he accepts at a very young age that he has to go into battle school. But he kind of despises that fact. And that emotional core keeps you going throughout the entire thing.
Yeah.
And I've read this book maybe 6 times in my life.
Yeah.
I read it last year again,
nice.
and I just loved it again.
It's fun. I really love when you have great internal conflict like that, where you're like, oh, you can sympathize with that, with seeing what you could become and having to choose between 2 very different things. You can't have both. Yeah, that's fun. That's compelling.
Yeah, it's good. And the sequel, I think, is fantastic as well. But I chose Ender's Game because I've just read it more.
Yeah.
And it's such an integral part of my childhood.
Nice.
So what's your number 5?
My number 5 is Stardust by Neil Gaiman.
Good choice.
I love this book. I love this movie. I picked it as one of my top 5s because my younger sister and I, Annie and I, would watch the movie.
Your younger sister?
Yes, why do I keep on saying my? It's not like we're related or anything. I would watch this with our younger sister a lot when we were little. I have the whole movie memorized.
Yeah.
And I watched the movie before I read the book. I didn't know it was a book for a while, actually.
You did that with The Hunger Games too.
I read the book before I watched the movie, but it was like on the way to the theater that I was reading the book.
Right, that's right.
And then I picked up the book when I was having a hard time personally. I had just gotten married, which wasn't the struggle of the hard time.
It was a horrible ordeal.
But I was way far away from my family. I was away from home. I was working at a job that was just really, really difficult for me personally. And I finally picked up Stardust, and it seriously was like a glimmer of hope in my life of, you love reading. Reading can get you out of the stuff that you're stuck in, So it emotionally just meant a lot to me because it was a great escape, which, that's the appeal of reading for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
I love the story. I love the fairy tale aspect. Neil Gaiman is just an incredible writer. He has such great poetry in his words, and I really love that. And I love how the book plays out. It's a little bit different than the movie, and of course it is. But Neil Gaiman also worked on the movie, which is why I think it's so great.
Yeah.
Anyway.
The movie is fantastic.
Yeah, but
from what I remember, it's been a long time.
I'll read it for you.
You'll
say
read
it word for right. No, I'll monologue the whole thing right now.
Right.
Are we human because we gaze at the stars?
Wow, you were not joking.
I was not joking.
You could bullshit the whole thing and I wouldn't know.
No, that really is the first line.
Wow.
I swear. Okay.
Consider me impressed.
Anyway, this book is fun because it's a classic fairy tale feel.
Totally.
But it has a lot of unique elements and a lot of unique problems that the characters run into. And it's fun to watch them, how they problem solve. And the story follows a young boy who is in love with a girl and promises her to give her a shooting star and she'll marry him. So he travels to this other world, across the way, behind the wall is what it's called.
Just in his backyard.
Into fairy. And he finds the falling star. Turns out the falling star is an actual woman. And he's like, okay, well, I'll bring this woman to my girlfriend and see if she likes her. And along the way, a lot of other people are chasing the star too, because whoever has the heart of the star has eternal life, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So they run into a lot of bad guys, a lot of fun magical hijinks, and it's fun to see a human mortal boy in this world of pirate ships that harvest lightning and witches that are centuries years old and like fun stuff like that. And in the end, you maybe they fall in love. Maybe he falls in love with the star. I don't know. You'll have to read it. But yeah, I think that's why I like it.
Yeah, I read this book last year as well, based on your recommendation. I'd watched the movie when I was a kid and I liked it. And the book is just spectacular. Neil Gaiman is an OG, one of the greats. We'll definitely talk more about that book on another podcast. But one thing that stood out to me when I read that book for the first time was how well he ties things that he introduces early into the book later on.
Yeah.
Those setups and payoffs are just perfect. He considers every tiny detail.
Yeah, and
just a master of storytelling.
Yeah, as the first time I read it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Probably just a throwaway something. But then you get to the last 3 chapters and you're like, oh, here's this tiny little Easter egg from that thing that happened in the first, or stuff like that. It's very fun.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, my number 4 is Getting the Knife.
Yay!
By Tamsin Muir. I was surprised by how high I put this on my list when I was putting this thing together. I thought for sure I'll find something from my youth with some sentimental whatever. Sentimentality, I guess is the word. And that'll be on my list as well. But I just absolutely love this book. It didn't have like as strong of an emotional impact in terms of like it's changed my life and how I see the world when I read it. It's just so well written and such an exciting story. It's got such amazing characters. The writing style is idiosyncratic. It's reaching towards like Terry Pratchett levels of wittiness and humor.
It is so funny.
In some cases, it might be on par with Terry Pratchett, which I know to some people might sound like hearsay, but I don't care what you think. It's spectacular. And we have done a podcast episode on this book, so we won't go too far into the details. You can go ahead and listen to that if you want to hear our thoughts, full thoughts on the story. But the basic premise is that it's a sci-fantasy story. Light science fiction elements, mostly fantasy, about Gideon, who is a cavalier, an expert sword fighter, who goes with her necromancer. Necromancers and cavaliers travel in pairs to help her become a lictor, which is a powerful necromancer.
It's like a demigod kind of thing.
Yeah. And the plot is similar to like Willy Wonka meets Clue, where it's like a murder mystery in a Willy Wonka house.
Oh, that's
it's so good.
It's so great.
The secondary characters, every single time we talk about this, we just get so enigmatic and excited because, I mean, I want to read it again. I've read it 3 times.
Yeah.
I think I've read it every year since I first found it.
Really?
Yeah. But it is just spectacular.
I want to read it again, even though we just read it last month.
Yeah.
But I got to finish the rest of the series.
I know, me too.
But that's okay. That's still fun.
And we have like 2 more books to read.
Yeah, 3.
3?
Yeah. There's a new one that...
This is news to me.
Oh, well, Electo the Ninth is coming out sometime in 2024, but no cover has been released.
Okay.
So, sometime soon.
I can't wait.
I know.
It's really, really good. And just talking about it makes me think, why did I put this at number 4? But I have some really good books ahead of this. And this is your copy.
Yep.
Do you have anything else to say about Gideon? Because...
Well, I'll say it when it's my number. This is also in my top 5.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I think I'll wait until I get to it.
Okay, so what's your top 4?
Okay, top 4, Enna Burning by Shannon Hale. This is the second book in the Books of Bayern, or the Goose Girl series. The Goose Girl is a retelling of a Forrest Grimm tale, The Goose Girl. And then Enna Burning follows one of the secondary characters in that. Enna Burning follows a secondary character from that book. And...
So is this the first one
This is the second one.
Okay, Goose Girl's number 1.
Goose Girl's number 1, Enna Burning is number 2.
Okay.
And I love Enna Burning so much.
More than Goose Girl.
More than Goose Girl. I love Goose Girl. I love all of the books of Bayern. I reread this series pretty frequently. And there's 4 books in total, but I kind of always peter off on book number 3 when I reread because Enna Burning and the Goose Girl are both so great. It follows Enna as she unlocks new powers. She learns how to control fire, and her hometown is in a big war, and she's sent to go help the warriors, and she's more like, I'm gonna go help the warriors. So she goes in and is like the queen's lady in waiting, and so she's there politically, but she kind of she feels like that's not enough for her, especially because she has this newfound ability to control fire. So she goes on secret missions to sabotage the enemy's camps that are nearby, and is kind of this like hidden war hero, and people have rumors about her. They don't know who it is, but they know there's a fire witch somewhere, and it's really fun. She ends up getting captured by the enemy, and we get this very... I've never really read a story like this before, but she gets captured by the enemy, and the enemy gaslights and manipulates her into falling in love and using her as a weapon against her home. And it's this very well done, complex... I don't even know how to say it. It's like Stockholm Syndrome kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's really well done. It's hard to read, but I really loved it. The ending is fantastic. It's kind of 2 books in one a little bit to me. But it's done very well, and it's meshed together well, so it doesn't feel like done with one act.
Yeah. Let's
go to act 2. I love the character relationships in this. There's fantastic slow burn romance between Enna.
Slow burn.
I know. Enna and Finn, who are...
Spoiler.
I know. Spoilers, but I mean...
I'm going to have to read this book.
Yes. It's so great. It's fantastic. I love it. Enna is such one of my favorite literary characters of all time. She's so strong. She's so... herself, and she will fight tooth and nail for what she believes in and who she loves, and I love that.
Well, you are a good salesman for that book. I read The Goose Girl a long time ago, around the time when I read Ender's Game, and I liked it, but I never read Enna Burning.
Yeah, Enna Burning is
I would
great.
like to read that. I'd like to read more Shannon Hale stuff.
I have read a lot of Shannon Hale, and I enjoy a lot of Shannon Hale.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Shannon Hale.
Okay, let's go on to my number 3, which is Guards by Terry Pratchett.
Oh, that's a fun cover.
I know.
I'm
it's
used
awesome.
to the green one.
Yes,
right?
that is my
green one?
original copy, and it's ancient.
This is so fun.
Older too. This is older than my original copy, but it's in much better condition.
Because you haven't read it as much.
Yeah. I read Guards the first time when I was maybe 13 or 14 years old. I was on a scout camp trip in Yellowstone, and Dad and I were driving there a day early to do some other stuff, and we stopped at like some lodge, and we were looking, just shopping, whatever, and they had a little bookstore section, and my dad saw Guards, and he said, "Oh, you've never read Terry Pratchett, have you?" And I said, "No," and he said, "You are going to love this," and he was right. And that has begun a lifelong affair with Discworld series and Terry Pratchett books and Terry Pratchett stories and movies. I love Terry Pratchett. He is probably one of the best writers I've ever come across. He is so witty and humorous, and he's a great storyteller too. I've read not all of the books in the Discworld series. There are many, but the great thing about those books is that you don't have to read them in order. You
can skip around. And
which I really appreciate, because if there's a series that you're not really in love with, you're like, well, I can drop that one and pick something else up.
Yeah.
I don't know when he wrote Guards, but to me it feels like he wrote it when he was in the middle of his tenure, I guess.
Yeah.
Because it is so strong from a storytelling standpoint. And I've read some of his earlier stuff, and they can kind of feel like whimsical adventures where things just kind of happen. as opposed to Guards, which felt like a complete story that happens, beginning, middle, end. I loved it as a kid because to me there's like a lot of what I like to call Kevin characters. Kevin from The Office.
Okay.
Where it's like everything that Kevin says is like, haha, he's so stupid.
Yeah.
Which to me is funny. I know that it can be annoying to other people. That's what I loved as a kid. There's the basic premise of the book is it's about it takes place in the city of Ankh-Morpork, which I'm probably mispronouncing.
It's a fantastic name, though. I always
His
love Terry
names
Pratchett's names.
are amazing. There's Carrot, Captain Vimes, Sergeant Colon, Nobby, Lupine Wants. There's so many amazing characters. That's another thing that there's obviously a train in my top 5. Big cast. It's written in third person. It swaps from POVs often. But there are so many like things that made me laugh as a 14-year-old that I still laugh at as an adult today.
Yeah.
Where it's like, haha, the librarian's an orangutan. And if you call him a monkey, he'll freak out. And the final climax is so hilarious and childish. I would love to talk about this book in our series.
I would love to read that too. So.
Yeah. I don't want to give anything away. But the story is about Ankh-Morpork and the city guard called the Watch. And there's a secret sect of evil brethren, the Elucidated Brethren, who are summoning a dragon to terrorize the city, and then they're going to bring in a pawn, a king that they can control, to kill the dragon, and then the king, they'll be in charge of the whole city. And it's about the Watch, who's a group of totally inept, cowardly men who take care of business. Right? I mean, there's no spoilers there. They save the day. It's heartwarming, it's endearing, and it's hilarious. I read it this year, and I just absolutely loved it again. And I picked up on so many subtle social commentary aspects of the story that I just missed as a child.
Yeah.
That's what makes this book even more special to me, is that you can read it as an adult and get so much more out of it and pick up on some of Terry Pratchett's cynicism towards humans and society.
Well, plus I also like that you can still enjoy that as a child
Yeah.
and enjoy the whole book without that.
Yeah, definitely.
Like it goes both directions.
It is such a rare type of book in that way.
Yeah.
Where it's like, how often do you have something where it's like it's made for kids and for adults? He's just like Neil Gaiman, he's a master at his craft.
Yeah, I've read, the only Terry Pratchett book I've read is The Carpet People, and I loved it. I really loved his writing, and I enjoyed that you can tell how much he loves it and how much fun he has when he writes. Like, that's fun to me. That's part of why I like Gideon the Ninth so much, too, is that you can tell the author is actively enjoying their craft.
Yeah.
And I'm like, good, we should write because we like to write.
I
Like,
agree.
it's fun to feel that through the words.
Yes, and that is a big reason why I love Terry Pratchett and Tamsin Muir so much, is those two writers, you get that feeling more than anything else.
Yeah.
Where they're just playing with their worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked about Terry Pratchett enough, but
That's
I love him.
Well, I guess we need to read Good Omens, because that's Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman.
I know.
Which, actually, I'm surprised I've never read that book.
I've started it, but I haven't finished it.
Ah.
Yeah.
Is it my turn?
Yeah. Number 3.
My number 3 is Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Titan's Curse. This is book 3.
By Rick Riordan.
Riordan. This is book 3 out of 5 in the first Percy Jackson series. It was very difficult for me to pick a favorite Percy Jackson book. Let me tell you all the story about me when I was younger. One time, my family went to the IHOP, and in the IHOP, there was a wall of gorgeously decorated Beanie Babies. And every time we went to the IHOP, I would stare longingly at their beamed baby heads. And one day, my mom and dad said, "You can pick one, Mallory." And I had a mental breakdown and cried in the IHOP because I couldn't pick a Beanie Baby.
I remember that day clearly.
I have a really hard time deciding about things. It's an issue for me. The top 5 was difficult, but the top 5th was the most difficult because picking that top 5 excludes so many more books to me. And picking a favorite book out of all of the world of Percy Jackson, and I've read all of them, was incredibly difficult. I love all of them for different reasons. I love the whole series because of the great cast of characters. I enjoy in the later series we get a lot of multiple POV books, which I love. I enjoy the problems. I love Greek retellings. This is what I grew up on.
Yeah.
And continued to grow up on, because as soon as I'd finish it, I'd just pick book one back up and read again.
Right.
I picked Titan's Curse because we meet some of my favorite characters. We meet Nico D'Angelo and Bianca D'Angelo. We meet Zoe Nightshade. We meet Artemis for the first time. And we also get a separation between Percy and Annabeth. Annabeth gets stolen and taken away. And everybody says, she died, bro. And he's like, I would know if she died.
Mm-hmm.
And he spends the whole time trying to get back to her and find her. And it's incredible. It's when we start getting a lot more information about the ultimate bad guy in this series. Like, the first book is a little bit light on that. Second book gets more. Third book is really where it's like, oh, okay, there really is an evil overlord who's trying to kill all of us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, same kind of thing as Harry Potter. You know,
right.
Starts a little light, gets heavy.
Yeah.
I just love that. I also love that Percy Jackson... This is when Percy and Annabeth start to recognize that, oh, they might have some feelings for each other, more than just friends, as they're growing up. And that's fun for me. I love Percabeth. This is OTP is Percabeth.
I'm surprised you don't have more YA
I
romance
know.
books.
Here's the problem. I love middle grade.
Mm-hmm. That's not a problem.
I think this is YA, and I think Stardust is YA. But
yeah,
like, technically...
I guess so.
This is definitely middle grade.
There's less romance in Stardust than in something like The Hunger Games or Aquitar.
Yeah.
Like, romance doesn't take as big of a role.
Yeah, it's much
a romantic story.
Yeah, but it's more about the adventure than falling in love. But this is one of my very also well-loved copies.
I remember that book.
It is a little bit falling apart as well, and that's why we love her.
It's a very nice looking book, actually. I like the cover.
I do too. These are my favorite ones.
Yeah.
These are selling big time right now.
Really?
Yeah, because the new series came out, and so collectors are like, I need the old books.
Well, don't give that away.
I will not. I actually just found 2 pristine copies at the library of books 2 and 3.
Oh, nice.
So I snatched those up because they were selling them. Sometimes our library sells extras or whatever.
Because nobody reads books anymore.
Yeah.
Which is a lie. People read books.
Yeah, I'm one of them. I actually finished 3 books last week.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I know you just wanted to brag about that.
I did.
I read Percy Jackson right as soon as it came out, and I really enjoyed them, but it's been a long time since I've given them another go. But they're good books, obviously popular for a good reason.
Yeah. I've reread... Oh, I didn't even say how many times I've reread things. I've actually only read Stardust once.
Really?
Yes.
Same here, but it's not my top 5.
I have read Enna Burning at least 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
I have read the Percy Jackson series, the first 5 times. And I think at least this one I've probably read 6 times.
That's impressive.
I like to... I usually reread them every year. It's around September that I pull them out.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a book that I've only read 1 time, because I would love to reread it, but it's so
you don't
big
have the time.
that I don't have the time. My number 2 is Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson.
It is so big you could kill a man with that.
Yeah, you really could. You could kill a family with this. It's a 1,000-page book. It's a very big epic fantasy.
It's a signed edition.
Yes, it's a signed copy. I got this at Barnes & Noble.
Yay.
Before this, at the beginning of this episode, I said that my top 2 were really easy to pick, and that's still true to this moment. I absolutely love Brandon Sanderson because of the emotional impact that these books had on me, and this is the 3rd book in the Stormlight Archive series. The reason why I love Oathbringer so much is because it's told from Dalinar Kolin's perspective, who is one of my second favorite character in all of fiction.
Wow.
I've read a lot of Brandon Sanderson's stuff, but the Stormlight Archive is my favorite. I think it's his best written work. It kind of feels like he's written so much up until this point that he's really become a master at understanding characters and character arcs. And everyone says, oh, his magic systems, his world building. And yes, that's true. That stuff is really well done. But to me, what I love about Brandon Sanderson are his character arcs. He is such a good character writer. He just knows how to pound the emotion into you.
Wow.
Which is a weird phrase that I regret using.
I get it.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of hard to describe the premise of The Way of Kings. The Stormlight Archive. It's a massive epic fantasy. You can use your imagination.
Yeah.
It's good guys versus bad guys.
Yeah.
Dalinar Kholin is a general, a former soldier. And this book is told primarily from his perspective, although there are many, many characters in this series. And each book is told from a different character's point of view.
Okay.
And basically half of this book is events that happen in the present to Dalinar Kholin and the other people in the war against evil. And the other half is told from Dalinar's perspective when he was younger. So
is it jumbled up or is it chronological?
It's chronological.
Okay.
The stuff in the past. So what he does such a good job of is making these characters feel real by giving them really fleshed out backstories. And it's extremely indulgent. That's why it's over 1,000 pages long.
Yeah.
But that's what I love about it. And I think Brandon Sanderson can be kind of polarizing because if you don't fall in love with one of his characters right away, then you'll just probably bounce right off this book.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it's so long. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's another flashback. It's like I'm on chapter whatever, 23, and it's another Dalinar flashback. Like, can we move on? But to me, the flashbacks are essential because they contextualize the present events that Dalinar is experiencing. The reason why I've chosen this as my second favorite is because the final climax is so emotionally satisfying and it spoke directly to me right when I needed to hear it, when I was struggling, and it's changed my life, quite literally. I see the world differently because of the events that I experienced with Dalinar Kholin. It is so special to me that it's kind of hard not to get emotional about it when you think too deeply about it. So that's why we should move on to your number two.
My number two. I need something else to prop up my books.
Oh.
While I see if I can do a little sneaky little... My top number two is Gideon the Ninth.
Woo! Surprises!
As recommended by Tanner.
Yeah. I'm so glad you loved this book.
I'm in love with this book, and I am in love with Gideon, and I'm in love with Harrowhark, and I'm in love with everybody else, and every single word on this page is incredible.
Yeah.
That's my review.
It's really good. I'm sure we'll do a sequel episode to Gideon the Ninth.
We couldn't even cover how much we loved in the first episode.
It's so dense, but my goodness, is it good?
The things that I loved most, and again, we did an episode about this, and you can listen to it, but I really loved the tone. I loved how scary and creepy and kooky it was, mixed with very inappropriate jokes. I laughed out loud. And
childish jokes.
Yes, I laughed out loud a lot reading this book.
Yeah.
And I really loved it. Gideon's character is just so
lovable.
Lovable and fleshed out and real, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It truly is. And it's a great... I'm like at a loss for words when I talk about this book.
I know.
The writing is so cleverly crafted that it's a treat to read. Yeah. Really, it is. And it's so enjoyable, and to watch everything come into place and fit together perfectly and tie up so well is so satisfying as a reader. I can't stop thinking about it.
I know.
I can't stop thinking about it.
We're obviously obsessed.
I started drawing some fan art for it recently, and I need to stay off Pinterest currently because Pinterest has started to show me fan art.
Spoilers!
And I can't stop looking at it, but I'm like, I need to not look at it because I haven't finished the series. But yeah, I seriously just can't stop thinking about them. I'm so intrigued by the world, by the problems that have been set up, and I'm now reading the second book. And we'll talk to you about that when we get there.
That was an emotional pause.
It's so great.
Yeah.
It's so fantastic.
More Tamsin Muir, please.
Yes, more Tamsin Muir, please.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna put this in front now. Sorry, guys, you've been covered up.
All right, my number one, my favorite book of all time.
Yes!
It may come as no surprise to anyone who knows me or who's listened to our podcasts, is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, which is the first book in the Stormlight Archive. It would look a lot bigger. It would look a lot bigger if it weren't a paperback.
Yes.
It is also 1,000 pages, over 1,000 pages long. Sanderson has also said that when he writes these books, he writes them as like 3 books in one. So that kind of like might take some of the blow out of like, oh, I have to read a 1,000-page book. Think about it as 3 in one.
Yeah, it's a trilogy.
It is. Yeah, it's a trilogy in one. The Way of Kings, the first book in the Stormlight Archive, it's told from the perspective of Kaladin, who is my favorite character ever in all fiction. Movies, TV, books, doesn't matter. He's my favorite. He is so well written. He's so relatable to me. I don't know if he's objectively a very well written character compared to. Well, I think objective lists are stupid. Actually, I'm just gonna say he's an extremely well written character, and he's also very relatable. Just like Oathbringer, this book came to me when I was very vulnerable, and this book was like an injection of therapy. I obviously love epic fantasy just innately. This was the book that really got me back into reading. I read a lot growing up and as a kid and in junior high, stopped in high school and in college. And then one day I just was in the mood for a good book again. And I looked up on Audible, epic fantasy, and the Stormlight Archive, or The Way of Kings was the first one that showed up.
How long is the audiobook?
Like 60 hours.
Nice.
It's maybe 55.
Like, this looks like something good to start with.
I know! But I was seriously just in the mood for it.
Yeah.
I'm obviously the target audience for this book. And I understand the criticisms. And I understand why it might not be other people's favorite book. But for me, it's exactly what I needed at the right time. And I just must love epic fantasy. Like, I love really big books and big stories. I love boring descriptions. I love crappy writing. Well, it's not crappy
You're really
writing.
pitching this book well.
I guess I'm qualifying why I like it, or trying to deflect criticism to explain why I like it, because people might pick out flaws and that might make me feel stupid, but I don't care.
I won't. You're only talking to me.
Well, I appreciate that. It's not bad writing. He is a good writer, especially his like opening chapters and sentences are really well done. But the books are so big that he has to write poorly or like degrade his quality to finish them.
Yeah.
It's a remarkable story. I do love the world and the world building. It feels extremely unique. The magic systems are cool. There's like over 12 magic systems. Wow. I know that everything about this book sounds overwhelming, but if it's the type of book that you're into, you will love it.
Yeah.
Kaladin, it's written in a similar style to Oathbringer. It should be the other way around because Oathbringer is the third book, but it's told from Kaladin's perspective, and half of it is told in flashbacks. And the ending is just spectacular. Like I said, his character arcs are the best part of his stories. And The Way of Kings is probably the best example of that. These books are hard for me to reread because they're so big.
Yeah.
And like I said, you might not love all the characters equally. And the second book is told from Shallan's perspective. And I love Shallan, but she's obviously not one of my favorites. I've read The Way of Kings 5 times.
Wow.
It helps that the audiobook is really, really well done by Michael Kramer and Kate Reading, I believe. They're fantastic. So it makes it an easy listen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I've sung the praises of Sanderson enough. He's in my obviously top 2.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love this book.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
It's big.
It's a big chunker.
It's big.
What's your number one?
My number one book is comparatively...
It's almost as big as mine.
Is comparatively 135 pages. Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. This is my top favorite book of all time.
Mm-hmm.
No questions asked. No debate, actually. This was easy for me to pick as my top favorite book. When I was in 5th grade, we read this in my 5th grade class.
Mm-hmm.
And I just loved it.
Really? You read that in 5th grade?
Yeah, we read it in 5th grade and I loved it. I didn't know exactly why I loved it so much when I was younger. I just knew that the characters were great and the story made me feel very deeply.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that was living, that was an experience, truly. And I loved it. And then I read it a couple times. I'd pick it up every now and then. Because, it's a short read. It's a very short read. This is actually a first edition printing.
It's beautiful.
It's gorgeous. I found it at a thrift store. If you are willing to dig through and look through all of the books, you can find fantastic treasures, such as a first edition printing of your favorite book.
That's so nice.
It was printed in 1971.
Wow.
And
pretty good quality.
It is. I think it's really great quality. This book was a life changer to me. It definitely changed the way that I saw the world, which is the point. I mean, it's a book about living. It's a book about everlasting life and choosing between living forever or living. Mm-hmm. And I loved the book. I watched the movie, and I enjoyed the movie because I am able to separate it from the book.
Sure.
In the book, Winnie's only 11 years old, and a 17-year-old boy should not be wooing an 11-year-old girl.
No.
In the book, it's not romantic.
Yeah.
It's not. That's my opinion. The movie, they aged her up and turned it into a romance, which is fine if I look at it as a separate creature.
Yeah.
Which I do. There's also a musical, and I got the chance to play Winnie Foster in a production of Tuck Everlasting, which was an actual dream come true.
Yes.
Because I've loved the book for so long. The musical is fantastic. It's very well
really
written.
Good.
And it's great because the story itself is fantastic.
It's almost a better fit for a musical than a movie.
I think it is.
In my opinion.
I think it is too, but I'm definitely biased.
Yeah.
This book follows an 11-year-old girl named Winnie who is stuck in her house and is yearning for adventure. And she is a chronic, rule-abiding citizen of her home. And she always does what she's told. She always follows her mom's rules. And one day she's like, I've had enough. I'm going to go explore our pond and our forest that we live in. And she does, and she meets a family there. And she comes to realize that they have been alive for a lot longer than they look. And there's a spring in her yard that gave them everlasting life. And one of the boys is like, you could join us. You could live with us forever and we can go on adventures for the rest of our life. How great would that be? So he gives her a vial and he's like, when you turn 17, you can pick, live with me forever and go on adventures. And there's this great conversation between the father of that family and how he says, what we have isn't living. What you have is living. We're stuck on top. There's no movement. There's no life. There's no breathing. There's no anger. There's no hurt,
There's no meaning.
There's no meaning. You can't have a life without an end. And it's just so fantastic. The last page, I'm going to try not to cry, but I probably will. The way this story wraps up is fantastic.
Yeah.
It is perfect. If you haven't read this book, you really should, because it's short and it will change your life. I honestly think anybody who reads this book will have an emotional reaction to it.
Because
I love it.
Everyone is afraid to die. Everyone wants to live forever and hold on to the things that you love.
So what would you do if you had the chance to live forever?
Yeah. It's a brilliant premise. It's a relatable conflict, and it's wrapped up beautifully.
Yeah.
I haven't read the book, but I've seen the musical, obviously, and you were fantastic in it.
Thank you.
And it's my favorite musical. I'm not a big fan of musicals.
Yeah.
So that's high praise.
Yeah.
I really do love it, though. I need to read the book.
And the writing is so fantastic.
Yeah.
Like, there it goes. It's just... The first, let me just read you the first sentence.
Oh, please. People would love to listen to that.
Please, let me read it to you. I'm going to read it.
Go.
You don't have to put it in the episode if you don't want to.
Okay.
The first week of August hangs at the very top of the summer, the top of the livelong year, like the highest seat of a Ferris wheel when it pauses in its turning. I just love this book.
That's nice.
I really just like Natalie Babbitt as well. Her other books are great too.
Cool. Well, it's interesting to see your top 5. I thought for sure I'd see a Hunger Games or something like that.
I thought about it. I have some honorable mentions that didn't make the list.
Yeah.
Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli. Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber, which is a YA fantasy. Yeah, I have a lot more middle grade than...
Yeah. We haven't done any middle grade on this podcast, but we'll have to do that.
Yeah.
I have 0 middle grade because I have a heart of stone.
I am not very surprised at your top 5,
I know.
but I really, really enjoyed
difficult.
it, so please don't be sad that I didn't.
No, I'm proud of it. It's a part of who we are,
Yeah.
our lists. And I think that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Do you have any other things? I don't have any honorable mentions.
Well...
I can't think of any.
Just kidding. Well, that's because we
should have.
Yeah, that's okay.
My list was, I think, a lot easier to compile than yours.
Mine was hard.
I seriously thought about this episode, and then I came up with my top 5, and I made one change.
I've been thinking about it for 2 weeks.
Really?
And I changed books while we were setting up.
That's funny.
So, I just have a hard time. It's hard for me to... Like, I've read so much, and I enjoy everything I read.
I do too.
So it was hard for me to think of, like, I kept on telling myself, I'm like, if I could only have 5 books that I could read for the rest of my life,
yeah,
what would they be?
That probably did not make your decision easier to make.
No, because then I'm like, well, then I can't ever read this ever again.
Yeah. I think what helped me was thinking about how many times I've read these books.
Yeah.
Like, limiting it down by, those statistics.
Yeah, that was helpful when you said that to me, too, because I've definitely reread... Well, I've only read Gideon once, but that's because we just read it.
Yeah, but I know you'll read that again.
I've read Tuck Everlasting I don't know how many times.
Yeah.
So.
And a Burning.
And a Burning I've read a lot.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for tuning into the episode. We hope you enjoyed. Leave a comment down below. What are your top 5 favorite books and why? Leave an essay in the comments, please.
Also, who do you think has the better top 5?
Yeah. Also, what sibling do you like more? Bye.